Have you ever witnessed a moment so quiet and so chilling that it seemed to echo louder than any scream? That was exactly what happened on that fateful evening when Grace Harrington, the poised wife of self-made millionaire Andrew Harrington, discovered her husband entwined in the arms of another woman. In the lavish opulence of a penthouse suite overlooking the shimmering city skyline, the tension in the air was almost suffocating. The Mistress Savannah Holt, a stunning beauty, with all the reasons to cling to Andrew, found her confidence crumbling under Grace's unflinching stare. Grace was calm, unnervingly so. In that single, breathless moment, every assumption about heartbreak, anger, and revenge was shattered, setting the stage for an unforgettable showdown. Andrew Harrington was born into a family of modest means in the Midwest. His father, Lucas Harrington, worked long hours in a steel plant, returning home each evening soaked in sweat and exhaustion. His mother, Rebecca, juggled two part-time jobs while caring for Andrew and his younger sister, Elaine. From a young age, Andrew exhibited a spark of ambition that set him apart from his peers. He was the boy who stayed up reading books on business strategy, the teen who spent summers mowing lawns and delivering newspapers to earn extra money, and the college student who launched a small online venture from his cramped dorm room. By the time he graduated, Andrew had already sold that online venture for a tidy profit. This early triumph convinced him that his destiny lay in building something grand, something that would lift him from the blue-collar trappings of his childhood. Fueled by an unshakable determination, he moved to New York City working day and night until he saved enough money to launch a real estate startup. Then came one success after another: a savvy investment in a digital streaming platform, a stake in an energy company, and finally a quantum leap when he founded Harrington Innovations, a conglomerate that would transform him into a multimillionaire before his 30th birthday. His journey was more than simple business savvy. It was driven by an acute observation of human desire and market trends. Andrew had a knack for understanding the public's appetite, whether it was luxury, condominiums, consumer electronics, or high-end gastronomy. He believed in bringing dreams to life at a price, and people hungry for status and novelty willingly paid. This was the foundation on which Andrew built his empire. He had wealth, he had influence, and the world recognized him as one of the young titans of industry. It was at a networking gala in San Francisco where Andrew first met Grace Delacroix, the poised daughter of French diplomat Louis Delacroix and American author Isabella Montgomery. Grace, who had grown up in the labyrinth of embassy halls and literary circles, possessed a certain understated elegance. While many tried to impress Andrew with boisterous talk about business expansions or fawning compliments, Grace was different. She asked him about his ambitions, yes, but she also asked about his family, his values, and his fears. This unexpected depth intrigued Andrew more than any lucrative investment opportunity ever had. Grace was in her final year at Stanford, pursuing an art history degree. She had flown to San Francisco for the weekend to accompany her father at the gala, a routine she often dreaded for its stale formality. But that night would be different, because on that breezy, star-laden evening, her path crossed with Andrew's in a moment that would shape the rest of their lives. Throughout the gala, they stayed huddled in a quiet corner. People milled about them, brandishing champagne flutes and forging superficial connections. Yet Andrew and Grace were lost in their own conversation. They spoke of everything from philanthropic endeavors to the moral dilemmas of wealth. There was an instant current of attraction, as though they had known each other far longer than a few hours. By the time the event ended, Andrew knew he would be seeing Grace again. They dated for nearly 2 years, during which time Grace learned just how demanding Andrew's life could be. Impromptu flights across the country, weekend business summits, and late-night negotiations were the norm. Yet whenever Andrew could carve out a moment of free time, he spent it with her, savoring quiet dinners in secluded French restaurants or taking spontaneous road trips to scenic wineries. They found common ground in philanthropy, both of them driven to use Andrew's growing fortune to improve educational initiatives in underprivileged communities. After Grace graduated, she immersed herself in arts administration, later joining a prestigious museum in New York City. From the outside, their relationship seemed too good to be true, two beautiful people deeply in love, supporting each other's aspirations. Indeed, every magazine that featured Andrew's success story would inevitably mention Grace, lauding her as the cultured, sophisticated partner who balanced his brash entrepreneurial spirit. They married in a breathtaking ceremony in the south of France. The wedding was small, but extravagantly tasteful, just close friends, family, and a setting that looked plucked from a Monet painting. Vows were exchanged in a sunlit garden. Champagne flutes clinked beneath centuries-old olive trees, and laughter echoed far into the night. In that moment, the future seemed as idyllic as the rose-draped arches under which they said, "I do." Shortly after their wedding, Andrew received a lucrative offer to expand Harrington Innovations into the European market. This new chapter demanded even more travel, more late-night phone calls, and more responsibilities. Grace, thrilled by her new position in the museum world, attempted to balance her career with her role as Andrew's wife confidant, an occasional travel companion. She considered it a privilege to travel to London or Berlin for his business engagements, using the opportunity to explore art galleries and cultivate her passion. Over time, they became fixtures at high-profile charity events and premieres. Paparazzi snapped photos of them at galas, capturing their every step in tailored suits and elegant gowns. Magazines dubbed them the modern power couple, the perfect blend of business acumen and artistic charm. From the outside, it seemed like they lacked for nothing. They had a swanky penthouse apartment in Manhattan, a sprawling estate in the Hamptons, and a winter chalet in Switzerland, all testaments to Andrew's soaring net worth. Yet despite the shimmer and sparkle of this life, Grace began to notice small cracks beneath the surface. Andrew had always been ambitious, but now his business demands had him checking his phone even during quiet dinners at home. Meetings extended late into the night. Deals spilled into the weekends. When Grace suggested they spend an evening at the theater, Andrew's schedule was often too packed. Soon enough, their once frequent shared dinners turned into fleeting moments over coffee in the morning if they were lucky enough to be in the same city at the same time. Grace did her best to adapt, telling herself that life with a brilliant entrepreneur came with certain sacrifices. She threw herself more deeply into her own pursuits, organizing exhibitions at her museum, forging relationships with wealthy donors, and setting up educational programs for budding artists. Every now and then, she thought back to their early days, those nights they spent walking hand in hand across the Golden Gate Bridge, dreaming aloud about the future. Whenever she felt lonely, she reminded herself that this was what they had both signed up for, that Andrew's achievements were for the good of them both. However, in the quiet hours of the night, in their penthouse bedroom, with city lights flashing through the drapes, Grace sensed that something was off. Andrew's kisses were rushed, his embraces fleeting. He seemed perpetually distracted, his mind caught in a labyrinth of conference calls and negotiations. Sometimes he would stare off into space, his eyes clouded with a mix of excitement and worry. When she asked if something troubled him, he'd dismiss it lightly with, "Just another business deal, don't worry." Those were the lies she learned to live with, even if she sensed a broader truth lurking beneath them. Savannah Holt was a charismatic woman with striking features, brunette hair that cascaded in soft waves, lips that seemed to curl in a perpetual half-smile, and eyes that spoke of secrets. She had a knack for being in the right place at the right time, a skill that had propelled her from a small-town upbringing to the cusp of the city's glitz and glamour. She claimed to be an investor, scouting for tech startups, though few knew where her funds originated. Andrew first encountered Savannah at an exclusive tech summit in Berlin. She stood out from the crowd of suited businessmen, wearing a chic white dress and exuding an air of self-assuredness that piqued his curiosity. She approached him in the lounge, introduced herself with a confident handshake, and asked for a moment to pitch an idea. As the evening wore on, they drank cocktails and spoke not just of business, but of life, his dreams, her ambitions. And for the first time in a long while, Andrew found someone who made him feel exciting, alive in a way that the daily grind had dulled. They kept in touch after that night. Their communications began innocently enough, business ideas, prospects in emerging markets. But soon, personal notes slipped in. "How was your day, Andrew? You seemed stressed during that call. Everything all right?" These messages appealed to his yearning for human connection, something he was no longer getting from Grace, at least. That's what he told himself. Before long, each new message from Savannah felt like a secret lifeline, a hidden garden that promised respite from the unrelenting demands of his schedule. When Andrew returned from Europe, his life in New York resumed board meetings, investor lunches, gala dinners with Grace. But the seed of curiosity had been planted. He found himself checking his phone during otherwise dull meetings, smiling when a text from Savannah popped up. Their conversations took on a flirtatious undertone, building an undercurrent of tension that was hard to ignore. With each exchange, he felt he was stepping a little closer to the edge, that intangible line separating fidelity from betrayal. Savannah's background intrigued him. She claimed to have started her own consulting firm, an entity that scouted promising tech ventures and matched them with private investors. If Andrew's sources had been put to the task, they might have uncovered that Savannah's track record was murky at best. But Andrew, enthralled by this new spark, didn't bother verifying the stories she told him. Instead, he was content to be swept up in the allure of something and someone unfamiliar. At first, it was just dinner. Andrew told Grace he had a business meeting with potential backers, which was partially true since Savannah had brought along a partner. The conversation revolved around market strategies and capital injections. Even so, the way Savannah brushed his hand or leaned in when he spoke made his heart pound in a way it hadn't for years. As the evenings multiplied, so did the sense of urgency and secrecy. Grace considered herself a perceptive woman. Through her upbringing and her work in the art world, she had learned to read people's small gestures, the nuances in their expressions and speech. She noticed Andrew's subtle changes. Immediately the phone he clutched, more often the polite but hasty kisses, before he dashed out for yet another meeting, the abrupt end to phone calls whenever she walked into the room. If Grace questioned him, Andrew would produce some plausible explanation, always delivered with an apologetic smile that asked her to trust him. Yet trust does not survive in a vacuum of doubt. Like a detective in her own home, Grace started piecing together the puzzle from the fragments Andrew left behind: suspicious time frames, business dinners with unnamed associates, cryptic text messages he tried to hide. She sensed that something or someone had ensnared him. Rather than confront Andrew with accusations, Grace decided to watch and wait carefully, maintaining her composure. She attended their shared social engagements, forcing smiles for cameras and acquaintances. All the while her mind churned, grappling with the horrifying possibility that the love of her life, the man she had believed to be her soulmate, might be slipping away. She told herself she was being paranoid, that Andrew's success simply demanded more time and more secrecy. But deep inside, she knew the truth was rarely so simple. One afternoon, Grace found herself in Andrew's home office searching for a notepad to leave him a reminder about a charity benefit they were scheduled to attend. Andrew was out. As she rummaged through the drawers, a small business card fell out, its edges crisp, as though it had only recently been printed. The name read Savannah Holt, followed by a phone number and the bold tagline, "Where Vision Meets Capital." The second line claimed consultant and private investor. Grace's pulse quickened. She didn't recognize the name, but something about the glossy black card, complete with an embossed gold font, felt unsettling. This was not the usual business contact Andrew kept. She placed the card back and stepped away from the desk, heart pounding. She recalled a conversation Andrew had with someone a few evenings prior, his hushed tone, the slight smile tugging at his lips. Instead of confronting him, Grace did something uncharacteristic. She decided to investigate. Later that night, while Andrew slept soundly beside her, she quietly grabbed her laptop and typed "Savannah Holt, consultant and private investor" into the search bar. Not much came up. No LinkedIn profile, no official website, just a few oblique references in niche business forums. It was a small red flag, but a red flag nonetheless. That was the moment Grace realized she needed to prepare for the possibility that her husband was indeed having an affair. A few weeks passed, and Andrew maintained his facade of normalcy, albeit a threadbare one. Grace's suspicions continued to fester, every new urgent meeting fueling her silent dread. Then came the night of the Harrington Innovations annual gala, an event as lavish as any in Manhattan. It was a night that showcased the company's achievements, with investors, dignitaries, and celebrities rubbing shoulders beneath glittering chandeliers. Grace wore a silver gown that night, matching Andrew's custom-made tuxedo. Their entrance drew the typical flash of paparazzi cameras and envious glances, everyone thinking they were the perfect couple. Midway through the evening, as Grace mingled with donors, she noticed a woman across the ballroom, stunning in a backless black dress, her eyes fixed on Andrew. This was Savannah Holt. Their eyes met. Grace offered a polite, if somewhat forced, smile, but Savannah simply glanced away, focusing again on Andrew, who was in conversation with a group of investors. Something in that moment, the brazen way Savannah looked at her husband, lit a fire in Grace's chest. Later in the evening, when Andrew seemed conveniently absent, Grace took the opportunity to approach Savannah, offering her hand. "I'm Grace," she said in a cordial tone. "I believe you've done some consulting work with my husband." Savannah blinked, her carefully curated expression faltering for an instant. "Yes, Andrew and I have collaborated, Savannah Holt," she replied, shaking Grace's hand with a cool, calculated grip. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Grace offered a gentle nod, the tension palpable. "I'm sure we'll see each other again tonight," she said, turning away. She walked off, blood pounding in her ears, convinced more than ever that Andrew's emotional distance had a name, and that name was Savannah Holt. That night, after the gala ended and the last guest drifted away, Andrew and Grace returned to their penthouse. She was withdrawn, offering monosyllabic answers to his attempts at conversation. Andrew, on the other hand, wore a veneer of cheerfulness, clearly hoping to avoid any serious discussion. Over the next few days, Grace found her anxiety reaching a breaking point. She could not abide the suspicion any longer. She needed the truth. With trembling hands, she hired a private investigator, Mr. Gregory Leblanc, a discreet professional, recommended by a close friend who had once navigated a similar ordeal. She despised the idea of spying on her husband, but the alternative, remaining in the dark, seemed even more unbearable. Within a week, Leblanc provided irrefutable evidence, photographs of Andrew and Savannah entering a high-end hotel timestamps indicating hours spent behind closed doors. There were even audio recordings capturing their hushed laughter, the soft murmur of endearments. Grace sobbed as she listened to these recordings in the privacy of her car, tears smearing her mascara. That night, she sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows in their penthouse, gazing at the New York skyline with a hollow ache in her chest. Everything she had built with Andrew, the love, the trust, the shared dreams, now seemed like a fragile house of cards, one puff away from collapse. There is a curious phenomenon that sometimes occurs when individuals face devastating emotional blows. Instead of unleashing fury or despair, they become preternaturally calm. Grace felt such a calm descend upon her, as though a switch in her brain had been flipped from panic to clarity. She had always valued composure, a trait honed through her exposure to diplomatic functions and high society events. Now, it served her like an impenetrable suit of armor. 2 days later, Andrew announced he would be attending a late business dinner. Grace knew precisely what that meant. She feigned indifference, even kissed him goodbye as he hurried out the door. Then she quietly followed him in a taxi. The city lights streamed through the window as the car weaved through Manhattan traffic. Her mind was oddly silent, no frantic internal dialogue, no chaotic swirl of emotions. Just a still, purposeful intent. When Andrew's car pulled up to the luxury hotel, Grace waited. After nearly an hour, she walked into the lobby, her head held high. The desk clerk barely looked at her, accustomed to the hush-hush liaisons that wealthy clientele carried out there. She stepped into an elevator, punched in the floor number she had gleaned from her investigator's report. The hallway was impeccably silent, the thick carpeting muffling her footsteps. She paused in front of the suite's door, heart pounding like a war drum inside her chest. In a moment of prescience, she realized she was about to fracture the illusion of her marriage forever. With measured, quiet resolve, she raised her hand and knocked. Andrew answered the door, his eyes widening in horror the instant he recognized who stood on the threshold. Behind him, the room was dimly lit, and Grace caught a glimpse of Savannah half-covered by a hotel bathrobe, her hair loose around her shoulders. For what felt like an eternity, the three of them froze in tableau. Andrew with terror etched onto his face, Savannah scrambling to cover herself, and Grace gazing at them with an eerily calm expression. In that moment, Grace realized that nothing about her marriage would ever be the same again. She felt a strange sense of detachment, like an observer watching a surreal performance. But her voice, when it came, was smooth, almost gentle. "Hello, Andrew," she said, stepping forward. "Savannah." Savannah took a shaky breath, her initial bravado vanishing in the face of Grace's composure. I'll just," she stammered, looking around for something to wear, for a way to exit the situation. Andrew reached out, perhaps to touch Grace's hand or to guide her away. She sidestepped him, remaining just out of reach. The silence in the room pressed down like a tangible weight. Even the distant hum of city traffic seemed to fade into nothingness. "It's not what you think," Andrew began the cliched line, sounding absurd even to his own ears. Grace turned her gaze to him, and in her eyes was not rage, not tears, but something far more disconcerting: resolution. Despite the adrenaline surging through her veins, Grace looked serene, poised as though she were standing at the edge of a vast, still lake. She had imagined 100 different scenarios of this confrontation, her screaming, her throwing objects, her storming out. But now the reality was different. She simply could not muster the theatrical display of anger that movies and novels had taught her she should have. Instead, she found herself infused with an eerie calm, a near-hypnotic lucidity. She regarded Savannah with a faint, almost pitying smile. "I think it's exactly what I believe it to be," she said. Then to Andrew she added, "I've known for a while." Savannah, clearly uncomfortable under Grace's unwavering gaze, grabbed her purse. "I think I should leave." Her voice trembled with an unexpected vulnerability. She walked toward the door, her eyes darting between Andrew and Grace, as though waiting for someone to unleash a tirade. When neither of them did, she exited softly, closing the door behind her. And just like that, the mistress, who had been so confident, so brazen, found herself backing away in the face of Grace's unsettling poise. Andrew and Grace remained. The hush in the suite was thunderous. Andrew reached for Grace's hand again, but she pulled away, crossing to the other side of the room. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, but outwardly she remained as placid as a marble statue. "Grace," Andrew began, "please, I can explain." She raised a hand, cutting him off. "Don't," she whispered, her voice low, but carrying the weight of finality. "I already know enough." They sat in silence for a few minutes, neither one knowing how to bridge the canyon that had opened up between them. Andrew, usually so eloquent in business negotiations, struggled for words. He realized that no carefully crafted statement would undo the betrayal that lay exposed before them like shattered glass. Yet he tried anyway. It started. Innocently, he began, his voice quivering with guilt. "Savannah is a consultant, and I met her in Berlin for a summit. We exchanged ideas, and then it turned into something else. I never meant for it to go this far." Grace listened, but she made no move to comfort him or to express anger. Her face was inscrutable, like a mask carved from porcelain. "You never meant for it to go this far," she echoed softly. "But it did, and you had choices at every step." The starkness of her words felt like a slap. She was right, of course. Andrew had chosen to entertain Savannah's overtures, to meet her at hotels, to hide messages and calls from his wife. No amount of self-justification could erase that. After a long pause, Grace spoke again. "I gave everything to this marriage, my time, my love, my faith in you, and this is what you did with it." Her voice was measured, almost heartbreakingly calm. "I won't scream, I won't fight you, but I will not pretend this never happened." Andrew swallowed hard. "Grace, I'm sorry," he pleaded. "I'm so sorry. I'll end it. I'll never see her again. Let's go home, talk this through, please." His desperation was tangible, tears swimming in his eyes. For the first time that night, Grace felt a crack in her composure. Her own eyes brimmed with tears, but she blinked them back, unwilling to cry in front of him just yet. "Your apologies don't matter right now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to think. Alone." Andrew nodded, defeated. In that silent, soul-crushing moment, it occurred to him that he might have shattered the best thing that ever happened to him, beyond the money, beyond the deals, beyond the empire he had built. And the worst part was that he might have done it all for a fleeting thrill he couldn't even fully explain. Grace left the hotel suite, and stepped into the cool night air, her mind whirling, yet her outward demeanor unfaltering. She took a taxi back to their penthouse, where every inch of space now felt tainted with memories she no longer cherished. The photographs on the mantel, she and Andrew laughing on a yacht in the Amalfi Coast, their wedding day in Provence, seemed like relics from a past that belonged to someone else. She tossed her coat onto the sofa and gazed out at the city's neon skyline. The silence in the penthouse was deafening, broken only by the steady hum of the air conditioning. She realized she didn't want to be here, not surrounded by the trappings of a life that felt like a lie. Deciding on a change of scenery, she picked up her phone and called an old friend, Felicia Reynolds, who lived in a cozy brownstone not far away. Within minutes, she threw some essentials into an overnight bag and was gone. Andrew returned to the penthouse 2 hours later, only to find it empty. He wandered through the spacious rooms calling out her name, but only echoes answered. Her closet was still full of her clothes, her perfumes lined neatly on the vanity, but Grace herself was gone. The weight of loneliness crushed him, and he slumped down onto the edge of their bed, burying his face in his hands. He had broken something precious, and the hollow ache in his chest told him it might be irreparable. Felicia Reynolds had been Grace's close friend since their teenage years, long before Andrew had come into the picture. While Felicia's family didn't move in the same elite circles as Grace's parents, the two had bonded over their love for art and literature. Felicia had carved a modest but comfortable life for herself, working as a freelance journalist. She welcomed Grace into her brownstone with open arms, instinctively sensing her friend's turmoil. Without pressing for details, she ushered Grace to her spare bedroom, offering a hot cup of chamomile tea and a warm embrace. But Grace needed more than a shoulder to cry on. Over cups of tea that grew cold, she recounted the entire saga, her suspicions, the private investigator, the confrontation. Felicia listened intently, her eyes flashing with concern and anger. "I always thought Andrew adored you," Felicia said, her voice tight. "I'm so sorry." Grace sighed, staring at the swirling steam above her teacup. "He did adore me. Maybe he still does. But that didn't stop him from betraying me." Felicia reached for her hand. "What are you going to do?" Grace shook her head, the quiet calm still enveloping her. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "I need time and clarity." Over the next few days, Felicia offered Grace a refuge. She made her friend eat, sleep, and go for walks in the nearby park to clear her head. Grace avoided Andrew's calls and texts, which arrived in a steady stream, ranging from desperate pleas to anguished apologies. She was not ready to talk to him, not while her emotions were raw and her world upended. Desperate to see her, Andrew sent flowers, wrote letters, and begged Felicia to intervene. But Felicia, fiercely loyal to Grace, refused to facilitate any conversation until Grace was ready. Eventually, Grace agreed to meet Andrew in a neutral setting, an upscale cafe in Midtown, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might recognize them. When Grace arrived, Andrew stood to greet her, looking haggard and anxious. His once impeccable suit was slightly disheveled, dark circles ringed his eyes. He pulled out a chair for her, but she remained standing for a moment, appraising him, with a cool detachment that made his stomach churn. "Please sit," Andrew said softly. She lowered herself into the chair, placing her hands on the table, fingers woven together as though to keep them from trembling. Andrew fumbled for the right words. "Grace, I can't describe how sorry I am. I wish I could take it all back, every meeting, every message, every moment I spent with Savannah. It was a mistake, the biggest of my life." Grace's expression remained stoic, though her eyes glistened momentarily with held-back tears. "Your regrets don't erase what happened," she said quietly. "I need to know why, Andrew. Why would you do this when we had a life, what I thought was a good life together?" He exhaled shakily. "I felt lost, like I was drowning in work, in expectations. It felt like we were drifting apart. And then Savannah seemed to understand me, or at least pretended to. I never stopped loving you, Grace. I messed up in the worst possible way." For a long moment she studied him. She saw the remorse etched into his features, the tears brimming in his eyes. A part of her wanted to reach out and comfort him, but the gulf between them was too wide and the pain too fresh. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she whispered. "Not yet. Not for a while." Andrew nodded, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "I understand. I want you to take all the time you need. I'll do anything, therapy, a counselor, whatever it takes. I can't lose you." They parted with no resolution, leaving Andrew feeling more desperate than ever, and Grace burdened by the realization that her marriage was suspended by a thread, one that might snap at any moment. In the days following that tense meeting, Savannah Holt tried to reach Andrew. Each time he ignored her calls, letting them go to voicemail. In her messages, she sounded indignant, then hurt, and finally apologetic. The truth was, Savannah had never fully calculated the fallout of her affair with Andrew. She had banked on his wealth, influence, and charm, but never expected her transgressions to confront her so directly in the form of a quietly enraged wife. Eventually, Savannah realized she had little leverage left. Andrew, racked with guilt and fear, had distanced himself. The door to the Harrington empire, which she had hoped to slip through, was now firmly closed. Seeing no further advantage, she left New York for a while, claiming new business opportunities in Hong Kong. What stung her ego the most was Grace's unyielding calm. She had expected a tearful, hysterical wife, not a composed and unreadable adversary. It was that unnerving composure that had ultimately driven her away. Even though Savannah had backed off, Grace's world remained in disarray. She extended her stay at Felicia's brownstone. The quiet afternoons reading by the bay window, the evenings spent talking about anything but Andrew, gave her time to process. Yet she couldn't escape the mental replay of discovering Andrew with Savannah in that hotel suite. Unbeknownst to Grace, Andrew was also fighting his own internal war. He attended board meetings where slides about profit margins and expansion plans no longer ignited his usual excitement. At night in the empty penthouse, the only companion he had was his regret echoing off the marble floors. He tried to bury himself in work, but with each passing day, he realized more acutely that none of his successes meant anything without Grace by his side. Driven to save their marriage, Andrew approached a high-profile marital counselor, Dr. Lorraine Whitman, known for her discreet handling of celebrity and elite clientele. He extended an invitation to Grace, hoping she would agree to at least a few sessions. To his relief, Grace eventually consented, her voice soft over the phone, when she said, "I'll try." Their first session with Dr. Whitman was tense, both of them sitting on opposite ends of a plush couch in a private office overlooking Central Park. The counselor guided them gently, creating a space where Grace could voice her anger and hurt, and where Andrew could express remorse and longing for reconciliation. "I'm here," Grace said, her voice steady but laden with pain. "But I don't know if I'm ready to forgive. I don't even know if I want to." Her tear-filled eyes stayed fixed on the scenic view beyond the glass windows, unable to meet Andrew's gaze. Andrew listened, nodding, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I understand," he said quietly. "I don't expect forgiveness yet, but I hope someday you can find it in your heart." Over the ensuing weeks, Dr. Whitman guided them to explore the root causes of their distance. Andrew acknowledged how his ceaseless drive had overshadowed the marriage, leaving Grace feeling isolated. Grace, for her part, shared how she had also retreated into her own world of art exhibitions, silently resenting Andrew's absence, but not confronting him about it. It was the first time they spoke so frankly about their individual loneliness. During this tumultuous period, Grace found an unexpected source of support in Andrew's younger sister, Elaine. Despite being Andrew's sibling, Elaine reached out to Grace, urging her not to isolate herself completely from the Harrington family. Elaine offered empathy, recalling her own heartbreak when her fiancé had betrayed her years ago. While Elaine did not excuse Andrew's actions, she reminded Grace that people can change, that sometimes the best parts of a relationship can grow back stronger after a storm. Though Grace was hesitant, worried about confiding in someone so close to Andrew, she found Elaine's sincerity disarming. They met in a quiet cafe where Elaine shared stories of Andrew's upbringing, of how their father's grueling work ethic had shaped his fierce ambition. "He's always felt he had to prove himself," Elaine explained gently. "That pressure can twist people up inside." Grace listened, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. She appreciated Elaine's effort to contextualize Andrew's flaws without dismissing Grace's pain. As they parted, Elaine placed a comforting hand on Grace's shoulder. "Whatever decision you make, I'll support you." Therapy sessions, conversations with Elaine, and Felicia's unwavering friendship gradually loosened the stranglehold of Grace's despair. Yet she remained cautious. Her trust had been shattered, and no amount of therapy could instantly mend that. Andrew, for his part, tried to show her his commitment, not just through words, but actions. He scaled back, his travel cleared his weekends, and made it a point to check in on Grace without pressuring her. One evening, he visited Felicia's brownstone unannounced. Grace emerged at the door, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What are you doing here?" Andrew, clutching a bouquet of simple white tulips, her favorite, took a tentative step forward. "I just wanted you to have these," he said, handing them to her. "No pressure to talk, no demands. I just wanted you to know you're in my thoughts." For a moment, Grace stood still, the ghost of a smile grazing her lips. In the past, Andrew would have shown up with lavish gifts, flaunting his wealth. The modest bouquet told her he was trying to be more genuine. She accepted the flowers. "Thank you," she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. They sat in Felicia's living room, talking about mundane things, the weather, a new exhibition at her museum, the potential expansion of Harrington innovations. Not once did they bring up Savannah or the affair. It was a fragile, delicate moment, like a tiny bud pushing through frost-covered ground, hinting at the possibility of new life. After weeks of living apart, Grace tentatively agreed to visit the penthouse with Andrew. It was late afternoon when they arrived, the New York skyline bathed in warm golden light. As soon as Grace stepped inside, a flood of memories and emotions threatened to overwhelm her. She remembered the laughter they once shared, hear the quiet breakfast by the window, but also the suffocating loneliness she had felt for so long. Andrew sensed her discomfort. "We can leave if it's too much," he offered, his voice gentle. Grace inhaled deeply, shaking her head. "No, it's okay. I need to face this." They moved to the living room, where Andrew had meticulously rearranged things, fresh flowers on the coffee table, a new throw blanket over the sofa, even new pictures displayed in frames. The effort touched her, though it also reminded her of how hard he was trying to erase the past. She appreciated it, but knew that real healing would require more than just a new decor. Throughout the evening, they spoke in measured tones about their ongoing therapy, about the future. Grace made it clear she was still undecided about whether she could continue in the marriage. Andrew, though visibly anguished, respected her boundaries, refraining from pushing for any definitive answer. After nearly 2 months of therapy, a pivotal session arrived. Dr. Whitman asked them to confront the question they had tiptoed around. Grace, do you see a path forward in this marriage? Andrew, are you willing to accept the consequences of Grace's choice? Whatever it may be, a hush descended in the pristine office. Andrew spoke first, his voice laden with emotion. Yes, I'll do whatever it takes if she wants space, if she needs me to sign any legal documents, if she wants me to step away from certain business ventures that cause problems. I'm willing to do all of it. Dr. Whitman turned to Grace, who closed her eyes, tears clinging to her lashes. I'm still so hurt, she confessed, and I'm terrified that if I stay, I'll always be looking over my shoulder, afraid you'll do it again. But I also remember why I fell in love with you, Andrew, and why our marriage mattered to me. Silence filled the room. When Grace finally looked up, a weary resolve glimmered in her eyes. I don't know what the future holds, she began, but I'm willing to try to stay in therapy, to rebuild trust, to see if the love we had can survive this. But you need to understand, Andrew, one more betrayal, and we're done. Andrew nodded, tears of relief streaming down his cheeks. I promise you, Grace, I will never betray you again. Dr. Whitman allowed a small smile. This is not the end of the work, but it's a start. In the weeks and months that followed, Andrew and Grace embarked on the slow, arduous process of rebuilding their marriage. Grace moved back into the penthouse on the condition that they maintain open communication. They wrote down rules of engagement, so to speak, no unexplained absences, no secret phone calls, complete honesty about their whereabouts. It felt a bit stifling at times, but it was a framework they both needed. Andrew also confronted his own emotional shortcomings. Through individual therapy, he learned how his relentless ambition had been fueled not just by a desire for success, but by a deep-seated fear of reverting to the poverty of his childhood. This fear, though never consciously acknowledged, had driven him to seek constant validation. Savannah had been a symptom of that unaddressed need rather than the cause. Acknowledging this was painful, but it was the first step toward real change. Grace immersed herself back into her career at the museum, finding solace in art's capacity to transform pain into beauty. Slowly, she allowed Andrew back into her personal world, sharing her daily ups and downs, her small triumphs and frustrations. Each time Andrew listened, without dismissing her feelings, a tiny sliver of trust was restored. Amid their fragile reconciliation life, threw them another curveball. Grace discovered she was pregnant. The revelation came one morning when she noticed she was unusually fatigued and nauseous. She bought a pregnancy test on a whim, half expecting it to confirm that her stress was playing tricks on her body. Instead, it showed two unmistakable pink lines. Shaken and uncertain, she decided to keep the news to herself for a few days, not wanting to pressure Andrew or herself into a hasty decision. But her emotions warred within her. How could she bring a child into a marriage that had just teetered on the brink of collapse? Would Andrew be a faithful, supportive father, or would old habits resurface? When she did share the news with Andrew, she found him stunned into silence. Tears welled in his eyes as he finally managed to speak. I'm going to be a father, he repeated, as though trying to convince himself it was real. Grace nodded, her own tears sliding down her cheeks. Yes, this changes everything, Andrew. He enveloped her in a trembling embrace. I know, he whispered. I won't let you down, Grace. I promise you. The pregnancy brought an unexpected sense of grounding for both of them. After the initial shock wore off, Andrew threw himself into being a supportive partner, attending doctor's appointments, reading books on fatherhood, even accompanying Grace to prenatal yoga sessions. Grace, still cautious, appreciated his efforts, but remained guarded. She had learned the hard way that actions spoke louder than words, and she needed to see consistency over time. Their couples therapy sessions now included discussions about parenting, how to communicate effectively, how to balance their careers with family life, how to model a loving partnership for their child. Dr. Whitman emphasized the importance of vulnerability, reminding them that trust only flourishes when both parties dare to be honest about their fears and hopes. As Grace's belly grew, so did a new sense of closeness between them. They spent evenings curled up on the sofa, talking about potential baby names or reading aloud from parenting books. Sometimes Grace would place Andrew's hand over her abdomen so he could feel the baby's kicks. Each kick reminded them of the life they were bringing into the world, a life that deserved a solid foundation of love and trust. One day, while Andrew was at a business luncheon, he spotted Savannah across the restaurant. She was dining with someone who looked like a foreign investor. Andrew froze, heart pounding. Savannah turned her gaze in his direction and gave a slight, knowing smile. The memory of their affair surged back, accompanied by guilt and shame, but also by a renewed sense of certainty about what he valued now. After the lunch ended, Andrew emerged into the restaurant lobby. Savannah approached him with a poised stride. Andrew, she greeted, her tone smug, yet curious. How have you been? He stood there, tension coursing through him. Hello, Savannah. I'm well. She tilted her head slightly. I see you've been avoiding my calls. I understand. Things ended on awkward terms. Andrew refused to be drawn into her game. They ended because I made a colossal mistake, he said, his voice level. Grace and I are working through it. We're expecting a child. A flicker of something surprise envy passed over Savannah's features. She forced a smile. Congratulations, she said, though the words sounded hollow. Andrew nodded curtly. I need to go, he said. Take care, Savannah. As he walked away, Andrew felt an odd weight lifting from his shoulders. That conversation, brief and tense, served as closure. The chapter with Savannah was firmly in the past, and his future lay elsewhere with Grace and the family they were building. By the time Grace was in her third trimester, her and Andrew's marriage had gradually stabilized. It wasn't without challenges. They still argued, trust still had to be reinforced daily, and the scars of betrayal did not disappear overnight. But they had developed new ways to communicate, to listen, and to show vulnerability, rather than hiding behind busyness or pride. On a crisp autumn evening, they hosted a small gathering for close friends and family in the penthouse. People marveled at Grace's radiant glow and Andrew's attentiveness, and for once, the cameras and social media gossip were absent. Elaine, Felicia, and even some longtime mentors raised their glasses in a toast to the couple's resilience. In a quiet moment, Andrew pulled Grace aside to the balcony. The city lights sparkled below them like scattered diamonds. He placed a gentle hand on her belly. I know I don't deserve it, he began, his voice husky with emotion, but I want to thank you for giving me another chance. For us. For our baby. Grace reached up, her eyes softening. We both had to grow up a bit, she said. And this is our fresh start. Tears glinted in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sorrow this time. They were tears of cautious optimism. Andrew nodded, wrapping his arms around her as gently as he could, mindful of her pregnant belly between them. In that moment, with the city humming beneath them and the sky overhead, they felt not the bone-deep ache of betrayal, but the tentative warmth of renewal. Sometimes the greatest battles in love aren't waged with shouting matches or broken dishes. They're fought in the quiet determination to rebuild what's been shattered. For Grace Harrington, that meant staring betrayal in the face and choosing against all odds to open her heart again. For Andrew Harrington, it required more than apologies. It demanded a change of spirit and a willingness to do the hard work of atonement. Their story reminds us that every relationship faces tests, some small, some earth-shattering. Yet it's in navigating these trials that we learn who we really are and what truly matters. If this dramatic story of betrayal, heartbreak, and renewal resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more real-life drama stories to light, reminding us all that beyond every storm lies the potential for a new dawn. Join us for the next story coming soon.